I want to welcome everybody to this evening's presentation on the history of Yiddish. Give you just a little bit of background about our affinity group. So I want to welcome everybody here tonight. Yiddish Alive is one of about 15 affinity groups that the FJMC has. I am the sponsor of this group and I'm also the host. And we're into our 5th year. We started at COVID and we're going strong. We meet every other week. The people that join Yiddish Alive are typically Yiddish speakers. We have a second group that's called Yiddish Life that meets Yiddish Light that meets every other week. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the ground rules tonight. Then I'm going to introduce Jeff. What we're going to do is Jeff is going to talk for about 45 minutes, after which we'll have a Q&A. What I'd like to do is I hope everybody knows how to use chat, because I would like you to chat me your questions and then we can go over the questions.
You may want to tell them
at the end.
use it.
Does everybody know how to use chat? Just raise your hand if you know how to use chat. All right, that's good. That's great. And you know, and if some of you don't know how to use chat, we'll have some time for you to ask questions. Yeah, we can go over past 9 if people want to continue to talk.
And when you get severance from your company, just don't.
So I thought I muted everybody, but I guess I didn't. I don't know who I'm hearing. Anyway, so keep yourself on mute. We'll unmute people during the question and answers. So as you saw in the invitation, the title of the session is Mama Lishan, from then to now. It's a brief history of the Yiddish language from its origins over 1,000 years ago through to the development into a culturally rich language of today. Jeff Newton will be our speaker. Jeff was born and raised in Brooklyn into a multi-generational bilingual family that spoke Yiddish and English. He understood and could speak Yiddish, especially with his maternal grandparents who were native Yiddish speakers who immigrated from Poland in the early 20th century. However, he essentially was illiterate, being unable to read or write Yiddish. In his 40s, his interest in Yiddish was rekindled with the arrival of many Soviet Jews, refuseniks to the US, and as a physician, treating many of them, he found he was able to communicate with many of the older immigrants using Yiddish. He enrolled in an intensive Yiddish course at the newly formed Yiddish Book Center in Western Massachusetts, followed by subsequent local courses taught by native Yiddish speakers, and learned to read and write Yiddish. He's taught Yiddish to beginners in adult education courses sponsored by both public and religious organizations, and will seek any opportunity to hear and dose Mama Lishan. Jeff's been a key leader of the Yiddish Alive Affinity Group, providing us with vocabulary and expressions associated with the biweekly theme. He is also an uncanny understanding of the origin of many Jewish words, which has been appreciated by those attending. So we've all learned quite a bit about Yiddish from Jeff. He's a great resource for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. He has a PowerPoint, and hopefully we've got it technically working. So it's all yours, Jeff.
Dank. Shalom Aleichem zu allen. Vandaag, ich will reden ein bisschen von der Geschichte von der Mama Lishan. Hey, entschuldigt mir. Nein, nicht. All right, don't worry. I'm going to speak English tonight. So what I said was that tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the history and development of Yiddish. And okay. Somebody has stole my thunder, although there's nothing there. So whoever's screen sharing, could they please
Unshare. We just
stop screen sharing?
Share.
Is
Do they know what that means?
Susan Merowitz.
Susan? Was it?
I'm going to stop that and then
All right.
hold that. How do I do that?
Like it's Susan Meyerowitz.
Is that who did it?
Susan, stop screen sharing. Okay,
Does she understand what screen sharing is?
No, we're seeing her screen.
yeah,
This is Leonard Merowitz. I'm the husband of Susan Merowitz. At the beginning, somebody said, turn on your share. So I did. Now I've got the people on the right-hand column, but I don't have the usual Zoom picture where I could unshare.
It says
you
stop
do that?
share. There's a red
enlarge,
button.
enlarge the thumbnail. Okay, you picture the people on the side. If you enlarge
Enlarge
that, and then you'll see at the top, it says stop screen share. You are sharing your screen, and then in red, it says,
Okay. Should I enlarge the icon of you or the icon of me? Should I enlarge?
enlarge. You said you see the thumbnails on the
Yes, on the right.
All right, can you enlarge that so it's full screen?
Okay, here I think I got it.
All right, and on the top, it should say,
I think you have it now back, or do you?
no, no, you got to put stop screen share.
All right, I see
Stop
share as an alternative, but
Okay,
I have to excuse my English. I have Parkinson's, so my memory is a little problem. But I don't see stop screen share.
It's
Fine.
covered by something else then. You have to move things around.
Okay.
Don't
You should let
log
him log off and
rejoin.
re-enter.
Just log off, just
Right.
log
Thank
off,
you.
mute,
Log
and then
off
come
Okay.
and
back.
rejoin.
Good idea.
okay,
Right,
Okay, good.
right, okay, let me make sure.
all
that
right.
Share, hold on.
So
I
let's start.
fiddled around with some things here, so, okay, you got it.
Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about the history, development of the Yiddish language. Yiddish language being spoken by Ashkenazi Jews, the majority of the Jews that have emigrated to America, and Ashkenazim, the plural. Why are we called Ashkenazi? Why is the name Ashkenazi? Where does it come from? Well, it comes from, it's a biblical name. Ashkenaz was, I believe, the great grandson of Noah. And as much as many of the names and places in the Bible, it comes from elsewhere. It's actually a derivative of a Akkadian or Assyrian word that in Hebrew became Ashkenaz. And these were, it referred to people who lived to the north of what was biblical Israel. And ultimately, it was carried to Europe, and even Rashi in the I think it was somehow in the 11th century referred to Jews of the area as Ashkenazim. And one of the original names for Yiddish was Lishan Ashkenaz, the language of Ashkenaz. Now, let me share my screen and we'll get going. All right, everybody see that?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, so when I was preparing this, obviously, I think most of us know that Yiddish is a Judaic language. And I think we're aware that there are other Judaic languages. I thought there might be 5, 6 different Judaic languages: Ladino, Judeo-Arabic, Judeo Berber. But I was just blown away by the numbers of Judaic languages, and we'll quickly go through this. I'll just scroll through this list. There, for example, is what's called Lishan Didan. This is Persian. Iranian Jews will speak this. There's a community in Los Angeles where Iranian Jews who emigrated brought Lishan Didan, and you can see Lishan, Loshen in Yiddish. It comes from the Hebrew Lashon, not Lokchen, Lashon. Okay. Interesting, there's a Judeo Malayalam. Malayalam. I don't know how many of you have read the book by Verghese, Covenant of Water.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's a Jewish character in there. This is in the southwestern part of India, Kerala, and it is a Judaic language. There's Judaic languages throughout the world, with some exceptions. I couldn't find anything about Japanese, Judeo-Japanese. There's Judeo-Chinese, the Kaifeng Jewish community. There are Germanic languages, of which Yiddish is one of them. Other Germanic languages akin to Yiddish or English is basically, it's got a lot of Germanic roots to it. Indo-Aryan languages, Bukharic, Iranian languages. It's just amazing. Many of these are extinct. Sephardic is an extinct Judeo-French language that named from the Hebrew word for French, Tsafartit. There's the Hispanic languages, the Romance languages, the Italian. Look at all the Judeo-Italian languages. It's just phenomenal. And unfortunately, many of them are extinct. Turkic languages, and then Judeo Papuamento. You know where Papuamento is spoken?
In the
It's a
Philippines, no?
Creole language in Aruba, and there is actually a Judeo Papuamento. So it's just fascinating as to how many Judaic languages there are. So let's get back to Yiddish. Yiddish is approximately 1,000 years old. And there are many theories as to how Yiddish developed, but probably one of the most accepted or recognized is put forth by Max Weinreich, who's a linguistic scholar. His son, Uriel Weinreich, also is a linguist. It appears that, and the theory is that the Jews of the Roman area world wound up migrating to various parts of the Roman Empire, either voluntarily or brought there as slaves, and then became free and migrated with the Roman legions. And as merchants, they wound up migrating through Italy and France, and ultimately moving to the area of the Rhineland with old Jewish communities of Speyer, Mainz, and Worms. There's another group that believe that Yiddish is more akin, or it was actually a mixture of a Bavarian German dialect along with Aramaic and Hebrew. So the immigrants, the merchants, brought with them the Aramaic that was the lingua franca of the the Roman Empire world. The Hebrew probably was not the language of everyday Israel from about the 500 BCE on. Aramaic came from the area of Assyria and Babylon, and it was the exile after the destruction of the first temple, and these people then began to speak Aramaic. So Yiddish incorporated Aramaic and Hebrew, and oh, sorry about that. And as we know, Yiddish also has a lot of Slavic words. As Jews migrated further eastward, they began to incorporate Slavic words into their language. The language was basically a dialect of Middle High German written in Hebrew letters using the Hebrew alphabet. So there's Slavic, Middle High German, Hebrew, Aramaic. A theory that doesn't have much credence is that the Khazars, which is a Turkic kingdom that converted en masse to Judaism in the mid to late 8th century, were the precursors of the Ashkenazi Jews. I'm not so sure that that has been substantiated. So if we look at the map, we can see that the original penetration of the Aramaic Hebrew-speaking Jews occurred in Italy and France, and they spoke a dialect of a Judeo or a type of Judaic language that was called Sephardic, and this ultimately became Western Yiddish. As they migrated further east into the Palatine and the Rhine area, they picked up more and more German, Middle High German, and ultimately, with further migration further east, you picked up, you saw more infiltration of Slavic words. Western Yiddish is nearly extinct. Western Yiddish died out probably in the 1800s, beginning late 1700s, 1800s, as a result of what we call the Enlightenment, or in Hebrew, Haskalah. The Jews in this area, particularly under Napoleon, became more assimilated and they gave up their Yiddish. Whereas Eastern Yiddish, which has several dialects, survived, and it probably was a result of increasing isolation of the communities as a result of prejudice, pogroms, restrictions, and the language developed as a result of the isolation. It actually began, the isolation began as a result of the Crusades back in the 9th century. Yiddish is written in Hebrew letters, the alphabet, but it's basically a Germanic language. Is Yiddish a language? Absolutely. For a long time, even up until when I was younger, people insisted, no, it's a jargon. However, Yiddish is standardized. There's a standardized spelling, a standardized pronunciation now. It's no longer a dialect of German, but language that falls into the family of Western Germanic languages, which includes English, Dutch, and Afrikaans. Think about how old English is. English didn't develop as a language until after the Norman conquest of England. The Norman conquerors brought with them their language, merged with Anglo-Saxon. You had the infusion of Danish, Scandinavian languages from the Vikings, and you had the Latin component due to the Roman occupation of Britain. So you could argue that Yiddish developed probably about the start of developing at probably about the same time and is as old. This is the Hebrew or the Yiddish alphabet. I'm not going to get into, teaching Yiddish language or words, but the difference is that there are some letters in the Hebrew alphabet that are not used in Yiddish unless the word is of Hebrew origin. And the vowels, if you read Hebrew with vowels, the vowels are written underneath or above the letters, whereas in Yiddish, the letters themselves form vowels. So a vav with a dot is a U sound, a yud is an E sound, so on and so forth. And then you have these combinations at the bottom. Where do you think they come from? These are combination of letters for which there were no sounds in the Hebrew or the Yiddish alphabet, and they come from Slavic origins. Yiddish is honestly, for those who know how to read or write Yiddish as opposed to English, it's so much easier. It is a strictly phonetic language. You know how to pronounce the letter, you put them together, and that's really how it's pronounced, with the variation of whether, it's a southeastern dialect, a northeastern, Glitziana, Litvak, Russische, Russian. So Yiddish has developed probably into 4 stages. They're not really that well defined. We meant the periods are estimates. So we mentioned there's Hebrew, Aramaic, Slavic, and Romance components. And the earliest, probably one of the earliest, if not the earliest, records of written Yiddish is in 1272. And it's from Worms. It was a machzer, high holiday prayer book. And the Yiddish is here. And transliterated, if anybody knows Yiddish today and anybody is familiar with German, Gut Tag im Betag Sie wer des Machse in Beis HaKnesses trage. To me, this sounds more like German. This is middle high German dialect. But you can see that there is Gut Tag, good day. Beis HaKnesses is Hebrew for a house of worship. And it's translated, may a good day come to him who carries this prayer book into the synagogue. If you notice the word order, it's not like English. The word order is very different. If you want to translate it literally, it's good day to him that brings this matzah in synagogue carries. So it's more like German. So, we're talking about something that's 800-900 years old here. But this is what we know as one of the, if not the first, evidence of written Yiddish. So the early history, the Jews that, as I had mentioned, who migrated from France, who spoke Laz, which was a Jewish French dialect, which is now extinct. They migrated for various reasons into the area in Germany along the Rhine. Myers, Worms, and they had expressions from Laz to their German. These included idioms from scriptural and rabbinic speech, from Hebrew, Aramaic, and that ultimately became the primary language of what we call the Western European Jews at that time. This is before you had the migration into the Slavic countries, Poland, Ukraine, the Russian Empire. And as I mentioned, the collective isolation that was forced upon the Jews after the Crusades further hastened the development of Yiddish as a distinct language. Then you have the next phase, the Old Yiddish, about the 13th century, where Jews migrated further eastward to escape persecution. They arrived in Poland, the countries we mentioned, the areas, the kingdoms were somewhat different than the map of today. And with the addition of the Slavic words and Slavic infusion, it morphed from strictly a German dialect into the language that we could recognize more today. And that gave us ultimately the division between Eastern Yiddish, which those of us who speak Yiddish in this country speak the Eastern Yiddish that we know, as opposed to the Western Yiddish, which is almost very little. There may be a few enclaves someplace in areas where there are some surviving Jewish communities. Up until the Holocaust, there were some small communities where Western Yiddish survived. Then we get to the next period, Middle Yiddish, when Poland became the center of Ashkenazi Jewry. And I say of world Jewry, and this is not to cast any aspersions on Mizrahi Jews, Jews of the Arab world, Sephardic Jews, but the numbers of Jews in this area just increased. Probably in the 10th, 11th century, maybe 3% of Jews were Ashkenazic Jews. By the beginning of the 20th century, the percentage of Jews who were Ashkenazim as a percent of all of world Jewry was 85, 90%. Yiddish became a written language before the 16th century. But what was it that made Yiddish more of a written language? What caused it to proliferate? The printing press. And it became a lot easier to disseminate books in Yiddish as well as in Hebrew. Modern period is classified from about 1700 to the present. As you mentioned, the Jewish or the Enlightenment, or in Hebrew, the Haskalah, and emancipations in Western Europe caused Western Yiddish to decline, and Eastern dialect became the more important and widely spoken one. By the mid-20th century, for reasons that we're all aware of, Yiddish suffered a terrible blow, and people felt that it was a dead language. Probably of the 6 million Jews who were slaughtered in the Shoah, 85% were Yiddish speakers. Yiddish, as we'll see, has experienced a resurgence, mainly from an academic perspective. and also because of the Hasidim and the Haredim. And we'll see that in a bit. So the dialects of Eastern Yiddish, and I'm not sure how well this displays, but you can see that there is what's called Litvish, or the Northern dialect, which includes Lithuania, Polish, as you say in Yiddish, Polish, which is the area of southeastern Poland, Hungary, parts of Romania. Some people will call it Galicianisch or Yiddish. Litvish or Galicianisch, and then you have Russisch, as in Yiddish, or Ukrainian. This is the southeastern. And the difference here is that somebody from Riga in Latvia or somebody from Warsaw will understand each other. They speak. I suppose it's, you know, when I speak with my southern compatriots here, it's a difference in pronunciation, but the understanding is the same, you know. Is it oil, O-I-L, or all? You know, it depends on where you're from. So Fleisch mit Beine is how you might say, pronounce it if you're a Lithuanian, which is Fleisch mit Beine, meat with bones. Herankommen, come in. Boyach is stomach. Her, der Tag, the day. Polish Fleisch mit Beine. Herankommen, Boach, Heuch, der Tag, as opposed to the Tag. And then Ukrainian is similar to the Polish. So it's really more a difference of pronunciation. YIVO, which is the Jewish Institute for the Institute for Jewish Research, or the Yiddish Wissenschaftliche Institute, has standardized both the spelling and the pronunciation of Yiddish. And it's called Standardized Yiddish. I mean, look back at, if anybody's read anything from colonial America, the spelling is all over the place. And it was similar in Yiddish, but now it's standardized, just like English has standardized spelling. So how many people spoke Yiddish at one point? Well, this is probably at the low end. It's estimated that maybe as much as 13 million people spoke Yiddish. The vast majority were from Eastern and Central Europe. Not everybody would, and we're talking about native Yiddish speakers. North America, this is the people who emigrated during the Great Migration of the 1880s to the 1920s. Not as many in Western Europe, in what was then called Palestine, Central and South America, Africa, which is mainly South Africa. And the South African Jewish community is similar to its origins to the American Jewish community. They migrated about the same time, but they went to South Africa as opposed to the States. Asia, these were mainly, this was again before World War II, and not so many in Australia. So these are English, US English words of Yiddish origin that appear in recognized sources: the Oxford English Dictionary, Merriam-Webster, and the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language. And a lot of them are what we know today has been incorporated into American English. And here's a list. And, you know, not many non-Jews use the word Yontif, but it is a recognized, meaning a holiday. It is recognized. And I'm sure, most of you are familiar with this. Not going to spend a lot of time on this.
Why do you
But-
know all these words?
No, you don't know spiel.
So then
I-
we have some origins of Yiddish words. Where do the Yiddish words themselves come from? Well, interesting, and I think we talked about this in our Yiddish Alive group, benchen, to bench left, or benchen, mean to bless after a meal, comes from the Latin benedicere. I'm not a Latin speaker, so I'm not sure about the exact pronunciation. Daven, to pray, comes from the Latin divine.
Jeez.
In Yiddish, cholent, which is the typical Shabbos dish, comes from the French chaude, to keep warm. I had a tante when I was growing up. Might not, comes from the French tante. A necktie in Yiddish, cravat, comes from the French cravat, which actually means Croatian. It was a Croatian style. A roman is a novel, same as in French. Fenster, fenêtre, the window. When you read Hebrew, when you read in Yiddish, it's Tulanen. Tulanen. Where does that come from? I think Muget can answer that. It comes from an old French form of lire, which comes from the Latin legere. I'm not sure, I'm not a Latin speaker. I don't know if it's a legere or legere. Legere means to read. Slavic words in Yiddish, a nebuch. Who doesn't know what a nebuch is? And nebuch, nebuch, too bad. New. How many times new? So, new, what are you going to do? Fablongen, henchkes. Henchkes are gloves.
Right?
Avats.
Gloves,
Where they go?
henchkes.
Henchkes, oh, for hands.
Bulka, a bulky roll. I mean, you can go into any bakery, whether it's in a Jewish area or not, and if you go into the big supermarkets and they sell bulky rolls. Smetana is sour cream. Spilka. These are Slavic words. Spilka means literally means needles, but
Pins and
it
needles.
has another connotation. So, like English has Latin, it has Germanic, Anglo-Saxon, there's contribution. No language is necessarily pure unless you have isolation. Maybe Japanese is a little bit purer because it evolved on an island, and it was Japanese had isolated themselves. But there are most of the Western languages that we know incorporate words from many other languages. Words that are German. Städtel, which is a small town, comes from the German Stadt, a city. A shtick, Schule, or Schul, a school. Schwitz, Tumla. I'm not so sure verklempt is necessarily German. That's become very popular as a result of Saturday Night Live. And from the Hebrew, Shabbos, in Hebrew, Shabbat. Yontif, Yom Tov. Shalom, Shalom. Tuchas. Tuchas comes from the Hebrew meaning tachat. The Hebrew tachat means your butt, or it can mean under something. Tzuras, Tzarot, Treif, and Chodesh. It's a month. One of the things that interesting, after the Holocaust, certain words fell out of favor in Yiddish that had more Germanic roots. So when growing up, a month in Yiddish could be a monat, which is a German origin, but now most Yiddish speakers would refer to a month as a chodesh.
When we came here, they started using Mona.
So, Yiddish literature. There are three historical periods, the Old, the Enlightenment, and Hasidic, and the modern. And it's in the modern that Yiddish really came to fruition as a literary language. We'll get to that. So the old Yiddish literature goes back to the 1500s. Eliyahu Levita, Elia Bocher was his name, wrote a book, the Bova book, 1507. What is the Bova book? The Bova book is a book about knights and princesses and chivalric stories. What did Jews know from that? You know, it was not necessarily part of their life, but they saw it in the areas, the countries, the kingdoms that they lived in. But to them, it was sort of pie in the sky. It was fantasy. So much so that the stories from the Bova book got referred to as Bova Mises. Misa is a story, and came down to us today as a Bubba Misa. So a Bubba Misa, you could say, oh, a grandma story, but really its origin is this fantastical stuff about kings and queens and princesses and knights. They zen and Bubba Mises. So that's the origin of that. Then there were others, and a Misa book, Ethical Folk Tales and Legends in 1602. Tsena Urena is biblical Hebrew, considered the woman's Bible. Now, women in this period of time were not literate necessarily in Hebrew, but they were literate in Yiddish. They spoke Yiddish, and many of them could read Yiddish. And in fact, Yiddish was written or printed in a certain type of script that became known as Weiberteich. Weib in Yiddish is wife. Weiberteich is wife script. It differed from this font, if you want to call it, or I'm not sure the exact word, the script that was used to either write or print Hebrew, Lishan Kodesh, the holy language. And so it is actually, I think I have someplace an example of that. No, I don't. So sorry about that. This actually is a fascinating book. I have it. I've read it not in Yiddish because it's not the kind of Yiddish that I would understand, that most of us wouldn't. It was Western Yiddish, but this was written in probably the late 1600s by Glickel Bas Yehuda Leib, Glickel of Hamelin, and it's the memoirs that she wrote. A fascinating book of a woman who was somewhat liberated for her times. It's the only pre-modern Yiddish memoir written by a woman, and it's about her life. She was married early, widowed, married again, widowed, and she was a businesswoman, and she kept a diary. And it's a little dry, but it's very interesting. And it's available, it's still in print.
Wasn't him. I don't know who it was.
Somebody laughed at that?
Somebody belched.
Oh,
All right. Then we get to Yiddish literature of the Haskalah and the Hasidic period. And these where you get all these Hasidic tales with the Baal Shem Tov, Nachman of Breslov, and the other Rebbe's. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because time is running out. And modern Yiddish literature are the people that we know of today. Sholem Aleichem, Sholem Rabinovich was his name originally, his pen name Sholem Aleichem, I.L. Peretz, Mendel Moicha Sforim. His name is Sholem Yaakov Abramovich, but Mendel Moicha Sforim means a bookseller. Mendele the bookseller. There is Singer, Isaac Bashevis Singer. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1978 for his books, which he wrote in Yiddish. He accepted the Nobel Prize in Stockholm, and he gave the Nobel acceptance speech in Yiddish. I don't know how many are aware of that. Then you have some of the post-Holocaust Musar movement. I'm not going to get into that, but it's a more ethical. And Abraham Sutzkever is a well-known poet who his daughter lives in Israel and has made some I wouldn't call them podcasts, but some films about his life. And you also have the emergence of women Yiddish writers. Esther Kreitman was a sister of the singers, I.J. and Isaac Bashevis Singer, Kadya Molodovsky, Celia Dropkin. Yiddish theater dates probably from the late 1800s. And it had all the genres that we're familiar with. Operettas, musical comedy, satiric reviews, melodrama, plays, and most of the classics translated into Yiddish, Yiddish King Lear. Abraham Goldfaden was considered the founder of the first professional Yiddish theater troupe. And Yiddish theater existed in South America, Africa, Australia, Eastern and Central Europe, Scandinavian countries. I'm sure most of us are familiar with Molly Picon, Maurice Schwartz. These were the famous actors of Yiddish theater and Yiddish films. And the themes in the Yiddish theater production mimic what Jews were experiencing: immigration, poverty, integration, ancestral ties, the breaking of those ancestral values and ties. And I love this quote: Jewish culture entered into dialogue with the outside world through Yiddish theater. Yiddish press. When I grew up, gosh, I can't remember how many Yiddish papers there were. And that's when I realized, I used to go around the corner to buy my grandfather the Forwitz, which was a socialist paper. Most of the Yiddish papers had a particular political or religious bent to it. The Forwitz, it was a communist, a socialist, religious. But I would bring it home, I'd look at it, and I'd say to myself, I go to Hebrew school, I know how to read Hebrew. Why can't I understand this? It just didn't make sense to me. And I was illiterate as far as Yiddish was concerned. The Bintel brief, the letters, a brief in Yiddish is a letter. And the Bintel is like it's hard to explain, it's a
Bundle.
packet, a little packet of letters. It's pronounced brief, but it's really brief. And the Forwitz is still published, but it's online only in English.
Remember.
And Ruchel Schechter, I think, is the current editor, and she produces a Yiddish Word of the Day, which we use in our group. Yiddish press today, the Allgemeine Journal, I'm sorry, it should have an R in it, that's Orthodox, the Zeitung, the Yid, the Blood, the Birovijana Stem, that came from, I'm not sure if, I don't think that is still in existence, but Birovijana is an area in Russia where at one point it was proposed that rather than a proposal for a Jewish homeland other than what is now Israel.
Yeah.
How many native Yiddish speakers are there today? Probably 600,000 plus worldwide. And again, these are not people like us necessarily. These are really native Yiddish speakers where native is their language of their Mama Loshen. And these are mainly Hasidic Jews, Haredim. What do people do in Yiddish today? Well, there are Yiddish theater companies. There are ATMs that you can bank on in Yiddish. The screens pop up in Yiddish.
Don't have
Yiddish
any-
bloggers,
it's in-
Yiddish board games for
in Bucharest.
Hasidic children. There's been such a proliferation of klezmer music and klezmer band around the world, even in places like Krakow in Poland. There's translation of classic works in children's literature, Yiddish clubs, much as Yiddish Alive and Yiddish Light. There's Yiddish speakers who gather in the Berkshires in the summer. And most major universities have Yiddish language programs. Oxford has an intensive Yiddish summer program. Columbia does. YIVO does. Here are some Yiddish resources that I don't know how to get this in the chat, but I can send this to Mike, and Mike can send this out to people who are interested. YIVO, if you go online and look it up, you can find the Yiddish Book Center and the National Yiddish Theater Volksbühne, which is cultural, but they actually have a weekly program called 15 Minute Yiddish mehr weniger, which means 15 minutes of Yiddish, more or less. It's more than 15 minutes.
Jewish time.
So just to end, I want to show something. I think that
Shtisel.
I don't know how many of you are familiar with Shtisel,
Yeah.
which was the Netflix series, 3 seasons, and it had a lot of Yiddish. It's about a fictional Haredi family in Israel. The main character is Sholem Shtisel. What is Shtisel besides his name? Well, Shtisel from the Hebrew shtuyot
Oh,
means nonsense. In Yiddish, it's shtus, or a little nonsense is the diminutive of shtus is shtisel.
I didn't know them.
So it's a little nonsense is actually what this means. I'm going to play this. It's a brief clip, and then we'll take some questions. Can you hear this?
Make it louder.
No?
Yes,
Oh.
no,
No, can't hear it.
no.
Uh,
Well, we
There
can.
you go.
I may have to. Let me just try.
Can you feel? Can
I might have to close some other things. I can't close that, obviously. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry.
Did you hit there's something you have to click when you share your screen before you put it on that shares the sound. If you forget to do that, you won't get any sound.
Yeah.
Who is?
So if you go out and try it again and make sure down at the bottom that you click the thing that says share sound.
We're on,
If you look at the bottom of the screen there, there's a volume control at the bottom right.
All right, hold on. I don't want to get rid of this completely. Okay.
That's a long time ago we watched
Yeah.
that. I enjoy.
Me too.
Jeff, on the bottom or top, it will say more. And when you click on more, it'll open up to show you sound. And you want to show it in stereo.
There it is.
Stereo and optimize too, optimize for.
All right, let's try it again. Oh, gosh.
I went to school.
It was working there for a second.
How about now?
Yes. Let them say something.
Wezen, ich habe gelernt einmal im Nepesa Sefer auf Yiddish, ein Sefer, was sie gelernt in Beiskis. Von, wie hat geheißen, der Säufer, jenem Käufer. Shalom Aleichem.
Very
Nicht
faint.
Shalom Aleichem, wie mir ruft ihm, a scheinem Sefer, was reißt die Herz. Auch das, Mendele. Nee,
No.
echt nicht Mendele. Tschatschkes. Yiddish sag ich dir. Der Beulischer, wie hat noch geheißen? Bashevis. Bashevis. Punktase. Bashevis.
Ich sag Bashevis. Ich sag, dass ist gewesen, ein größerer Schegitz.
Hefsche. Ich hab ihn nicht getroffen. Ja, Schegitz, nicht kein Schegitz. Etwas hat verstanden.
Notice the word they're using here, they're translating it as a rascal, it's shagit, which is really, doesn't have a great connotation. But
Ich sag dort a scheinem Sach. Die Meisim gehen nicht zu kein Schumplatz. Alle sind du. Jeder Mensch ist a besser Quores. Mam ist a besser Quores. Was liegen in ihm, seinen alle Bobes und Sedes, sein Tate, sein Mame, sein Weib, sein Mädel. Alle sind du die ganze Zeit. Ihr versteht?
Mir versteht, mir versteht.
so this is very interesting. It's in part funny. If you caught it at the beginning, he's talking about a book written by Singer that he found in the bathroom. And then he now becomes very philosophical. This is the end of, I think, the last of the scene of the series. The series is available no longer on Netflix, but it's available on Prime Video, Amazon Prime Video. And that's it.
Yeah.
So I will stop sharing.
Thank you.
Great.
Yasher Koach.
That was
Yasher
great. That was
Koach.
great. That was fabulous.
Thank you.
Good
And
job, Jeff. Yasher Koach.
Yeah.
Ashkenazi, good job.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a quiz?
in 2 Wochen,
I took
in
notes.
2 weeks.
In 2 Wochen hat eine Quiz.
2 Wochen.
Wird vergessen in 5 Minuten.
Emitzer hat Frage. Anybody have questions in the chat?
I'm looking, I'm going down. So I've got one here from Harvey Horowitz. Where does the N come from where Hebrew Yaakov becomes
Aha,
Yaakov or Yankel in Yiddish?
Yankov. Yankov in Yiddish is Yaakov in Hebrew.
Yeah.
I think this is a Polish it comes from, I think, the Polish. How many of you follow tennis? All
Tennis?
right. There's a Polish tennis star woman, Iga Swiatek. It's pronounced Swiatek. There's an N, but it's written as an SWIA. There's no N in it that we know it. So I think that is from the Polish. There's also another theory that it could be when you write Hebrew and in Yiddish, a vav, the straight line. A nun is a straight line with a little curve at the end, but when you write it fast, it could look, a vav could be mistaken for a nun. So that's another theory. Yaakov, there could be Yankov. Don't ask me how, but that's the Yiddish of Yaakov is Yankov, or the diminutive is Yankel.
Thank you, Jeff.
So we have
Other
one,
question?
I have a comment from Janice McCoskey. She said that the forwards is not just English, it's also in Yiddish online with Rachel Schechter, who is a native speaker. So that's good. Another question is, how old is Ladino?
Ladino is probably, and I'm not at all an expert on it, but
Thank him.
if you look at the history of the Jewish community in Iberia, in Spain and Portugal, it antedates the Eastern Jewish community. It goes back long before it. When exactly Ladino developed as a language, formal language, I'm not sure. I can't answer that. Maybe if there's somebody who is of Sephardic origin and answer that.
PhD, I would have known.
Wow, that's.
Other questions? Mike?
Anybody wants to raise
I
their
wanted to say something. May I speak? In the discussion of the different dialects of Yiddish, I'd like to point out that Duolingo, which is now teaching Yiddish for the last few years, and they decided to choose a dialect that is used by Orthodox Jews in Lakewood, which comes from Poland. And this is the dialect exactly that I speak. And it's really called Polish, and it's neither Litvish and it's not Galicianer, although it sounds somewhat like Galicianer.
Yes.
And when they teach it and they teach you to read it, all the oo's are, they tell you the oo's are pronounced as E. So Kim is spelled, Kuf Yud Mem, and it's pronounced, and you would read it as Kum, but it's, if you know your Hebrew and whatever, but it's really, they're teaching you to pronounce it as E.
But that's not quite the standardized Yiddish taught by.
That's right. It's what they are teaching, but it's not Litvish Yiddish, which is the standardized Yiddish. But they're teaching it that dialect.
There's also, if you look at Hasidic communities, their Yiddish is different, and it's sometimes difficult to understand if you're not from the Hasidic community. But thank you for that, Anne. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was, well, I read about it, and I have a linguistic background, so it was very interesting to me.
There was one comment from Janice McCoskey saying that the duolingo Yiddish is Hungarian Yiddish.
Yeah, okay.
Wow.
Janice, do you want to say something about that?
All of the brothers, including
I'll lose Janice. She didn't get that.
Sure. Yeah, I've actually been doing Duolingo myself for 4 years, although my background is Lithuanian Yiddish from my parents. But and I didn't want to do it for the first maybe 6 months it was out, because I didn't want to pollute my own vowels with with these with the good git and all and so on. But I finally gave in just to get the vocabulary practice and word order. They actually made some compromises to try to not totally exclude the standard Yiddish. So they, in the development of it, they they would, if there were 3 or 4, Yiddish has typically 3 or 4 words for the same thing, like potato, they would pick one that everybody knew, which might not be the most popular one in Hungarian Yiddish, but they said, okay, we'll pick one that everybody will understand. So there are very few words that they use that are completely not in the standard Yiddish dictionaries. Yeah, but a lot of times it's the word that's second or third down the line. But they've tried their best. It was a big debate at the beginning, but they're all through all their languages, they want it to be a living community, and they weren't counting the people like the Schechters and the Gottesmans who created their own little communities of teaching American children to speak Yiddish at home. That didn't count. It wasn't a big enough population to count.
Thanks, Janice. Raise your hand. Shirley had something to say.
I'm not sure where the joke in this is, but growing up in Israel, if my sister or I were asked where our parents were from, I would say my mother's from Romania and my dad is from from Poland. And so they say, oh, a Litvak and a Galicianer, you're in a very dangerous home. It's a mixed marriage. I never got the joke. I'm not sure what they meant, but it always brought us a laugh to everybody.
Well, it's the old rivalry. The Lithuanian Jews considered themselves much more of the intellectual elite than the Polish Jews. And I mean, with some reason, you had the great academies in the yeshivot in Lithuanian countries, and but it was sort of a rivalry. I mean, Lithuanian Jews looked down on Litziana, the Polish Jews. And I saw this myself when I started seeing the refuseniks coming to this country. There were some that came from Riga, who spoke what they considered Tiefin Yiddish. I suppose Tiefin Yiddish is an intellectual Yiddish. They was somewhat snobbish, to be honest with you. And that's not to put down Littish or denigrate any other group, but it's sort of a classic rivalry, and I suppose that's what they meant. Although Romanian and Polish were not necessarily Galiciana and Litvak, if you strictly speaking. There's a question in here: will Yiddish survive in the U.S. other than with the Orthodox? Yes, I think it will survive. I think it's, but maybe not in the sense that it was prior to the Holocaust. And it is a language of the Hasidim, many of whom speak only Yiddish. And it is, however, also very common in academic circles. There are many, many academic programs for Yiddish. I think if you look at any major university, there are Judaic studies, which include Jewish Latin Yiddish.
Yeah.
So I think it will survive. Is it going to be common lingua franca? No, unless you go to Borough Park and other enclaves. It is spoken in many areas where there are a Haredim, a Hasidim in Israel. And it no longer is denigrated in Israel as it was early on in the history of the state of Israel. It's much more accepted today. But it's a great question. Yes, I think it will survive.
So I've got Annie Schulman has her hand up. You have to take yourself off of mute. Unmute yourself.
Sorry, I didn't know how to undo my raised hand.
Okay.
How do I undo that?
I'm happy to stay around. It's 10 after 9, but if anybody.
Anna,
has
it's in
any-
reactions. You go down to reactions.
Okay.
So I got a question from Harvey Horowitz. My mother joked she was from Harvey. you got-
Slobodki. She was from
Okay.
From where?
Is there ever such a
Say it again, Harvey, slower.
Slobodki? Slobodki?
Is there such a place, Slobodki? Anybody know?
Don't know.
Country.
It's interesting, I tried to find, it took me a while to find the shtetl where my maternal grandmother came from because their pronunciation was different than the Polish. She came from a town, a shtetl called Dubetsk, which in Polish is it's somewhat different, but we ultimately found it.
Oh, just one comment Shirley mentioned to me while you were talking. They still have an active Yiddish theater in Bucharest, and they still have an active Yiddish theater in Warsaw.
Yeah, they mentioned Warsaw.
Yeah, Warsaw, but the Yiddish theater in Bucharest was interesting because Shirley's family played there, and they still have 25% of their plays are in Yiddish. And I know that.
And it's supported by the government.
Yeah.
So
it was really interesting to see that, and Shirley was overwhelmed realizing her family was there.
Yeah, wow.
So do we have any other questions? So we're going to end tonight. I just mentioned some of the people that have been on tonight have not been on Yiddish Alive, or I don't know if they've been on Yiddish Light. If you'd like to keep your ear to Yiddish, please join us. We meet every other Monday. We'll have one in 2 weeks. And Al Davis, Al, raise your hand, Al.
And introduce Joe.
Yeah.
All
Al
right.
Davis. And the leaders for Yiddish Alive are Joe Rothstein. Joe, raise your hand. Esther.
Hi, Joe.
Esther, I don't know who else is here. Is Barry Wagner? So I don't know. See, Saul Awand is our poet laureate. He always comes up with a Yiddish poem with regards to the theme that we have, and he's had some pretty good ones, and they're very funny. They're very good. So we'll send out to everybody here. You'll get a chance to join. This has been recorded, so anybody wants to share it with somebody else, and please join us if you'd like to get a little bit more and have a chance to speak a little bit and learn a little bit, or if you don't know very much Yiddish, you can join Al's session on Tuesdays.
Tell them how many people are on tonight.
Yeah, we had a good group. We had about 85, I think, so it was a nice group.
Wow.
I saw the number 88 at one point.
88. Well, you looked after
Bonnie
I
would
did.
like to
Bonnie,
say.
do you have a question?
I
I-
just want to say a sincere thank you. Thank you for this program.
my
This was
pleasure.
incredible. I appreciate every week between this and Yiddish Light. Thank you so much, all of you, for doing this.
Wonderful.
From my heart, I say
Done.
thank you.
De weiß
Shane
wat gehad zoveel mensen
Shane
dat
Dunn.
daar gekleven hebben.
Vielen Dank.
I call. Sehr good. Dankeschön.
Dankeschön.
Jeff, thank you so much. But Mama found a book today that y'all might
Good
want.
Yontif, good Yua.
Good, yes.
Yes, I've seen it.
She is going to her high school that used to be a high school that's now an elementary school. And since she's 100, she's going to Meminger to talk to the kids. They want to ask her questions about being 100 years old. So she was going through everything, and she
my God.
book, and it's got have y'all seen this book? It's got translations of Yiddish, and I'm going to tell you what it translates. But yeah, I'm going to tell you, it's got a whole list of like the Owl and the Pussycat, and it's got Old Smoky and Old King Sai. So maybe I'll send this to you and you can send it to Jeff and to
I'll send it to everybody.
Yeah.
I'll send it to
We'd
everybody.
love it.
Thank you.
I had a classmate from college who has translated Dickens and many other books.
There's Dickens in there too. Now, she also found a poem, The 8 Nights of Hanukkah, and next week I can read it. It's
Oh, wow.
That will be, in 2 weeks, that will be our theme, will be Hanukkah.
well, this is cute.
Good, that's
The
great.
first night of Hanukkah, my true love gave to me, but it goes the 8 days.
Maybe you should just read it, not sing it.
You think so?
No,
Don't give away my stuff.
Oh.
Don't give away my stuff. That's next week on my channel.
That's on yours. Well, maybe we'll come join you and you'll let me sing if they don't.
Oh, I will let you sing. It will be my pleasure.
Roz, have your mom sing. She's got a good.
Yes.
But she can't read it. She's gonna have to memorize the whole thing.
But she knows them all. Good, okay.
I'll
Bei
go
mir
take.
kannst du singen. Bei mir kannst du singen.
Oy vey.
Sei gesund.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Nice to meet you. And Jeff,
Thank you, Joe.
so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Night is very good.
Thank you.
I'll go send you this book.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
we'd love it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Good
you.
night, y'all. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Thank you.
Wie sei Zuckman you all in Yiddish?
That's
Alex.
Allah.
You talked
That's
about
That's an Alaman. Alaman.
Y'all. Y'all. Okay.
That's Southern Yiddish.
Yes.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.